measuring and improving the return on investment of customer experience. My colleague Darren is our senior account manager. He's also here behind the scenes. He's managing the show and keeping track of questions in the chat. We want to keep these sessions short and focused because everyone's time is precious, but today it's a popular topic and there's a lot to fit in. So we'll start with a quick bit of housekeeping. There may be a chance for questions at the end if we've got time. You can submit them in the chat and Darren will collect them together. And if we don't have time at the end, we'll be happy to set up a call if you'd like, and then we can follow up one-to-one. And we are recording the session. We'll send you a link to the video, so don't worry about scribbling down everything, or don't worry if you have to leave early. Quick introduction to me. I'm Guy Letts. I've worked with over 300 companies to implement our software, backed up by our fresh thinking on this topic. And before that, I personally ran customer service in a very large company. Of course, I don't know your business or your customers nearly as well as you do, but to some degree from that role, I have walked in your footsteps and faced the challenges that you face. Over the last 14 years in CustomerSure, we've learned a huge amount about collecting customer feedback and improving customer experience. The purpose of these webinars is simply to share that experience. We're not here to sell today, but we do find that this is a good way for people to get to know us, and that sometimes leads to us working together. So that's why we do it. Well, this topic has proved to be our most popular by far. There's hopefully something that resonates with people here. I've given it the title Return on Investment for Customer Experience. But customer experience for you might refer to it as a voice of customer program or net promoter score, CSAT, customer feedback, satisfaction surveys, journey mapping, customer success, anything that you're doing to improve customer service. Well, whatever terminology you're using, hopefully all the principles will be equally applicable, but it's basically anything that you're doing that might need some time or money investing in it. So it might be that you need some help with these tips for making a case for to get a budget approved. It can also be a really emotional topic in some cases because it might feel that you've been asked to justify your jobs or justify why your team or your work is necessary at all, or why the cost of it needs to be what it is. And perhaps secretly we wonder why the sales team never get asked to do this, or is that just me? Possibly. Fundamentally, what we're going to be talking about is being brilliant at whatever it is our customers are paying us for, in order that by doing that, we make our business more successful. Well, why do we need to calculate return on investment at all? The benefits are completely obvious to most of us. I guess we'd say that we feel it in our bones. And when you consider the opposite, how about not caring about customer experience? How about starving it of time and investment? How will customers feel about that? And what will be the impact of that on our business? Well, these statistics reinforce the fact that if we have a bad experience ourselves, as customers ourselves, it makes us want to shout that from the rooftops so that our friends don't suffer the same fate. But however strongly we feel that it's something worth investing in, if we haven't got facts and data from our specific business to back it up, it can be an uphill struggle to get extra budget or headcount. We need numbers to make that business case, especially when many different projects are competing for investment, which I guess will be the case for many of us. So where we want to get to is presenting a return on investment model with facts and numbers to back it up, so that it's no longer my opinion versus your opinion, or about the loudest voice wins. And when you do calculate the ROI, you might actually be surprised how much investment you can justify and still get a good return. Sometimes it's also about more than presenting a business case to spend money. Sometimes there's an argument to be won about whether this type of work is worth doing at all. So before I go through the calculation, I'm just going to quickly summarize a couple of common objections to whether money should be spent in this area, so that when we get to the calculation, we understand the job that it needs to do. Here's the first objection. Some people will always start from the position that anything except sales is a cost that should be reduced or eliminated. I wonder if you've experienced that. Oracle is the 4th biggest software company in the world. A friend of mine who worked there once heard Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, say, "If you're not selling, what are you doing here?" I think he might have used one more word than that, but it wasn't a very polite word. Oracle is a fabulously successful company, and I'm sure he was exaggerating to make a point, but strong personalities, strong opinions can be very influential. It can seem like you always get rewarded for saving costs, though, can't it? Saving costs rather than spending money. Much safer to show that you've increased profit by reducing costs than by taking a risk and investing money to increase revenue. Perhaps the main reason is because cost savings are easy to measure. Numbers are dead simple, aren't they? And they're clear and easy to understand. It's not hard to present the case for saving costs when it just boils down to a number. And we see the power of that, don't we? As we look around at what happens in companies when they are driven by cost savings. Big headline cost saving numbers can be justified to justify all sorts of things that can turn out to be terrible ideas. So, for example, we have customer service teams that are outsourced or offshored to people whose first language is not English, but their salaries are much lower. So it's a big cost saving. Or a customer with an issue that's not covered on the website has to go and grapple with a chatbot, which just repeats everything you've just read on the website. But the project was justified by a theoretical cost saving of lower call volumes and lower headcount. Or another one, average handle time is still a thing in some places. If someone has a complicated problem, advisors are under pressure to fob them off to keep the call short. Fewer people handling more calls. It's a cost saving. All those, what you might call customer hostile activities, were voted through because someone had a big cost saving number, which made a good, compelling case. So the first challenge, the number we come up with to make a case for investment has got to be at least as compelling as a simple cost saving number. And we need to make it clear how this type of activity is not a separate cost center, but that it's, as you can see there, it's not a separate thing, it's a core part of making the business more successful. Second objection is that customers hate customer satisfaction surveys. So possibly we could say by not inflicting them on our customers, we're actually doing them a favor. Weirdly, I'm a bit sympathetic to this one, but only because most customer satisfaction surveys are awful. I expect we've all received hideously long surveys, and if you reply to them, the replies are never even read by anyone, even if we've raised a serious problem. Well, this premise is wrong, by the way. Customers only hate bad satisfaction surveys. Our servers at Customer Assure are whirring away around the clock, processing millions of survey responses. So we've got the evidence to prove that customers love feedback processes when they're good, when they're done well. So in the nicest possible way, when I've taught you how to just do a return on investment, please don't use that to justify creating a bad survey process. That would, for me, that would be a tragedy. Do talk to us first. We'd love to share some tips. Even if you end up using somebody else's software, we'd love to help you get your approach right. Okay, let's start to build a compelling financial case. Let's start to work out how to get that number that's at least as strong and compelling as the cost saving. Let's work out how we're going to get that number for investing in customer experience. Do note, by the way, that if you Google return on investment, it will give you a formula that's more likely to be for a financial scenario, a financial investment, like if you're buying some shares and they increase in value, how good is that return going to be compared with investing in a different company or a different thing? Well, what we're doing is exactly the same principle, but the terminology is perhaps different. We're more about investing in an initiative or a project within your company. So I've called it the ROI for a project. Basically, will we get more back from this project than it costs us to do it? The equation's the same, but we're just going to use that different terminology compared to investing in the financial markets. You'll also want to factor in other things like whether the costs and benefits are one-off or do they repeat on an annual basis, for example. Is it a saving annually over time? Just to keep it right, just to keep us right, here's a more official definition of what I just said. So it's the Harvard Business School definition of return on investment. Here's the equation that matches that definition. We're looking for the result to be a positive number to make the investment worthwhile. So anything greater than 0 is good. And the bigger the number, the easier it is for us to make the case. And in practice, although we're looking at an equation here, it may just be enough to present the two numbers side by side. So what people are really going to be interested in is how much is this going to cost us? How much are we going to get back from the investment? And is how much we're going to get back much bigger than the cost? So you can present it as the equation, but often it'll be just those two numbers side by side that people are going to be interested enough. I'm assuming that we won't have any problem identifying the cost part of the equations. It's going to be things like headcount costs, if we have to buy software licenses or any equipment. Costs are usually fairly apparent and fairly easy, so I'll not go through those. We know how to do that. I will say though that in my experience, you can keep the headcount costs really low or even 0 in many customer experience initiatives. How to do that is a topic in its own right and too much to cover today. But I have worked with many companies and have done it myself within my own department when I was doing that role. You can repurpose existing roles and reallocate responsibilities. Sometimes there's a bit of hump of work to get over in the first place, and there are techniques for overcoming that too. But you can often get this job done without employing more people. And that's going to help our equation. That's going to help keep our costs low compared to our investment. So if you're going to invest in measuring and improving customer experience, you should expect some knock-on benefits, which means that you can do it with less people. So you can justify moving the work around. There will be more work to do to get the benefits, but you can save it in other areas, save it in firefighting, for example. There should be less of that to do. So that will need some thinking through, but it should be part of the change management aspect of your customer experience program. And I'm sure you can see, looking at the equation there, the smaller you make the cost part in the denominator on the bottom, the higher the return on investment will be. Putting numbers on the financial value of customer experience program is more likely to be where we have to scratch our heads a bit and put our thinking caps on. On the surface, it's going to be a mixture of tangible and intangible benefits. Some numbers will be easy to find because you measure them already. Others, maybe like the value of reputation improvement, are harder to put a number on. But it's worth at least trying to put an estimate, even on the intangible benefits like reputation, because there's no escaping the fact that reputation does have an impact on your company's revenue and profit. So if you leave that out, if you leave the intangible benefits out, you're missing out an important factor, and your calculation will not fully reflect the reality of all the costs and benefits. Obviously, some of this is difficult. In sales, for example, you can say, if I employ X heads, I'll get Y amount of revenue. But customer experience, on the other hand, is about the value of keeping those customers once you've won them and getting them to the point where they're happy enough to spend even more money with you and blowing their socks off with great service so that they don't hesitate to recommend you to other people. Taking a couple of these points, new customers referred. Well, today you might not know why you've won a customer. You might not know whether they've come through a recommendation. But at some point in the customer journey, you will have contact with them and you can ask. Or at another point, you might be inviting them to give feedback, and you can find out then by adding a question. It really helps to be able to identify the source of customers so you can tell exactly how the power of reputation or great service, how much effect that's having on word of mouth referrals, so that you've got this evidence to show how many people are coming through that good work you're doing on customer experience. Another example from the value added column, premium prices, third one on the list there. That's an important factor to think about. Obviously, we all want to charge higher prices. Wouldn't it be great if we could all put our prices up? But you can only be the most expensive if you're the best. The bigger reason, actually, even than making it easier to hit our numbers, the bigger reason for charging premium price, or just being able to justify premium prices, is because the type of customer who pays more for good service is the best type of customer to have. If you think about customers who just choose by the cheapest price, they're quite flighty. So they'll go somewhere else at the drop of a hat, and then you'll need to do the work of winning another customer to replace them. So if your service is good enough and consistent enough to justify premium prices, you'll also attract premium customers, the best type of customers. Final point on the right-hand side, working on improving customer experience should go hand in hand with improving your business processes. When you've got a properly functioning customer feedback system, it will highlight areas of complexity for customers, or what you might call friction in your business processes, things you do that make it harder for customers to deal with you. And when you fix those, you're not only improving customer satisfaction by taking away that friction, you're also simplifying your business. And in all likelihood, when you do that, you're reducing costs, either because there's less work to do, or you're simplifying systems, or even because it's generating fewer complaints that you need to fix. And if all of this works hand in glove with a Voice of the Customer program, you'll be getting real-time data that helps you address problems quickly. And you'll learn which problems are occurring most frequently. You'll get data to back up your investment decisions. And all this data helps you to prioritize which things are most urgent and which investments of time and money in improving customer experience will give you the biggest bang for your buck. A couple of tips then. The measures that you choose will vary. It's going to be different depending on whether you're a B2B or a business to consumer. It'll depend on your industry sector maybe. And not all businesses have recurring revenues. Some businesses are more transactional. But I hope you can get a feel for the sorts of things that should be influencing your return on investment calculation. Although I've been talking about customer experience, customer satisfaction scores haven't played a part so far, have they? One of the most valuable things I think I can teach you is really not to obsess about satisfaction scores, and certainly never set targets for them. What you should do is use customer feedback and do use satisfaction scores, but not as targets. Use them as measures, things that you keep an eye on your dashboard to do what you might call job number one better, the job you're employed to do. Use them to tell you how well you're doing at attracting and retaining customers. As we said at the beginning, what is it your customers are paying for? Use satisfaction scores to do that brilliantly. That might be improving the quality of your products. It might be improving the quality of your services. It might mean that you need to communicate really well with your customers, being easy to do business with, making it simple for a customer to raise an issue if something goes wrong and to get it fixed quickly. Those are the things your customers want you to be great at. So I'm not saying that a high net promoter score is a bad thing to aim for, but the high satisfaction score, the high NPS score, should be as a result of doing all those other job number one things. It shouldn't be the target itself. So if you do want to set some targets, start with things like resolving customer queries more quickly, the things that customers really feel directly. Well, the bottom picture is what customer satisfaction looks like in companies where they set targets for satisfaction scores. It has all sorts of bad consequences for customers, actually, because you'll have people saying things like a 9 or a 10 really matters, or it just affects people's behaviors because they're obsessed about the number, whereas what they really should be obsessing about is the person. So the top picture is the face of someone who thinks you're brilliant, and they're going to tell everyone. And that's what we should be aiming for. Much more valuable to be focusing on happy customers than on the numbers, which are as a result of the happy customers. So going back to that earlier picture, the fire hose, the big jet of water comes, your business is firing on all cylinders when customers are positively gushing about how good you are. The last issue to take account about calculating a return on investment successfully is this one. If your process for measuring and improving customer satisfaction, if your customer experience improvement program, whatever you call it, if it's not designed from the ground up to deliver a financial return, then it probably won't. So you probably can't take the ROI calculation we've just looked at and retrofit it to your current process and expect to get a healthy number. You might do, but if it wasn't designed to, then that would be a coincidence, because it might not be giving you one. It needs to be designed intentionally to deliver a return on investment. And one of the litmus tests for that, if you like, is whether it's obvious to everybody. Can somebody look at your customer experience program, your customer satisfaction measurement, your customer success program? Can people instinctively look at that and immediately say how that is delivering a return on investment? So take satisfaction surveys or net promoter score, for example, which many companies do routinely. How exactly does collecting that data stop you losing customers? How exactly do those processes result in your existing customers spontaneously recommending you? How exactly does it make it easier for your company or the sales team in your company to cross-sell and upsell? When I ask these types of questions, people generally say, well, we do feedback and it tells us, we get data and it helps us improve. And that's not a bad answer, but it's woolly and it's not nearly specific enough. It doesn't explain, for example, how those things improve the experience of a customer who does fill in a survey. So if a customer does fill in a survey and gives a bad score, what happens exactly in your company to make sure you keep them? And how does it happen quickly enough from the customer's point of view, particularly? And if a customer highlights a problem with your product or the service that you deliver, how do you make sure it gets fixed and not forgotten so that people down the line, other people don't experience it? The lesson that I'm trying to communicate here is that just applying an ROI calculation to a same old annual satisfaction survey will not generate a return. You'll have to change how you do things as well. There's got to be some rethinking. So building on that point, I can't stress enough that measuring the problem doesn't solve the problem. I'm sure you've got the point about that now. When we're talking about customer experience, I think the balance is just too often wrong. There's too much emphasis on the measuring, and we're worrying lots of debate about whether you should use NPS or CSAT or something else. Actually, that doesn't matter a whole heap. They're all good tools that can do a job for you. Too much emphasis on the analysis, but not nearly enough emphasis on the doing. So is there as much conversation, for example, on what you're going to do with the data, how you're going to channel it into people who are doing the jobs in the company, and worrying less perhaps about whether you use a 5-point scale or a 7-point scale or a 10-point scale. And I think it's probably true to say that most companies go live with customer feedback programs before they've designed the processes to deal with what they'll do with the feedback when it starts coming in. And I think that's why we all probably feel like we've been ignored when we do reply to those satisfaction surveys. So it doesn't matter how much you measure or how sophisticated the analysis or how deep your customer insights, it's the follow-up processes, the corrective actions that you take that will deliver the return on investment. That work, those processes are what are going to make the ROI big. So if you want to achieve the ROI, that will mean that in many cases, people will need to start picking up the phone more often to rescue customers who are at their wits' end and are about to leave. And as anyone who works with us knows, because it's important and we bang on about it all the time, the key to success is design those feedback processes, including the follow-up processes, from your customer's point of view. What would your feedback process and the follow-up look like if your customer designed? What do they want it to do for them? What's in it for them in filling in your satisfaction survey? Design it from the customer's point of view, not from the point of view of, well, what data do we want? What data do we want to collect? What's going to make that customer shout from the rooftops about how wonderful experience there was? What's going to make that customer shout from the rooftops about how wonderful their experience was, rather than shouting about how terrible it was? Well, I hope that all makes sense. If you're in any doubt about the importance of follow-up to the return on investment, just to put a number on it, when I was the customer experience director, we added £1 million worth of recurring revenue back onto the bottom line by finding out which customer losses could be avoided and collecting feedback in real time and making sure that we avoided losing those customers who could be rescued and could be retained. So it can translate into quite a bit of money. The good news about follow-up is that it's not burdensome. It needn't be burdensome. Just one point to illustrate that, really, there are only two types of feedback, generally speaking, two buckets into which you might put feedback. One type you might call service improvement. It's something about improving your business processes, your IT systems, your people's behaviors, your commercial policies. If somebody suggests an improvement about how you do business as usual, then it might just need a quick thank you message, just a polite thank you, that's a great idea. Do you know what? We're going to plan that into next year's business plan. Thank you for the suggestion. or even, sorry, we're not going to do that, and here's why. But the other type of feedback, the second type, is where something has gone wrong for an individual customer. Your processes might be fine for the most part, but something's gone wrong for them individually. They might have called up 3 times and nobody's returning the calls. And really, they're hanging on by a thread. You could be about to lose them unless you respond to immediately. So do spend at least as much time designing those follow-up processes. How are you going to capture all those service improvement ideas? How are you going to make sure you keep all those customers who are at risk? And do that before you go live. If you don't do those things, it's less likely that you'll achieve the return on investment that you're aiming for. Okay, we've done how to measure it, a little bit more about how to improve it. Well, here's a maturity model that helps you progressively improve customer experience, the way you measure it and the corrective actions you put in place to increase that ROI. Obviously, today we don't have time to go into any detail on this, but this maturity model can help you make progress on being better at measuring and being better at improving customer experience and generating that ROI that we're all after. On the left side of this diagram, well, that's a company that possibly doesn't collect feedback at all, or maybe just does a customer survey from time to time, but with no system or no rigor behind it. Or they might only do it in one pocket of the business. So you only find out about one area. You've got no idea about where the hotspots in the organization are. And that data that you collected gathers dust because nobody's thought through what to do with it. And actually, because it's not done intentionally or in a purposeful way, people don't really know what to do with it. So it just gathers dust and people are busy and they get on with other things. But hey, you've done a customer satisfaction, and that's like eating vegetables. That's a good thing to do, right? On the ideal case, over on the right-hand side, well, typically then you've covered the whole company. You've perhaps mapped all your customer journeys. You'll be doing it in every area of the organization. You'll be measuring consistently across the business, and you'll be doing it on an ongoing basis, not annually when you want some data, but at those times that are relevant to the customer, so that, again, doing it from the customer's point of view, you're asking for feedback at those times when customers are more likely to have feedback that they want to give you. So you're hitting them with the survey at a time when you're making it convenient for them to tell you what's on their mind after you've done something for them. And over again on the right-hand side, typically then there's more integration with your business systems. The feedback will be delivered to the people who need it, and you can arrange it so that it's role-based, so people just receive the information that's relevant to their role, and keep helping them make decisions and take action that gets your company so that it's firing on all cylinders. If you get feedback channeled to the right information to the right people in real time as they're doing their job, that's when it's a slick system that's part of business as usual, and it helps people to do their jobs better. Well, finally, when you've got your numbers together, the next thing you have to do is use them to go and make your case. And there are a few things that you can do to make that case more powerfully. Remember, we're up against the people, the competing projects with the dead simple cost saving numbers. Well, how do we take our ROI number? We've got our number now. How can we present that in a compelling way? Well, a few tips here for going into those presentations. It might be one big meeting, or you might be going around canvassing people individually. A few tips there you can read through. I'm not going to go through those in detail, but just to highlight a few things. You can communicate a vision for how improving customer satisfaction will benefit the business. Building that picture, if you like, that or telling stories of how you're going to take things from how they are and get things to a better place, particularly if you do that from customers' point of view. You're going to want to change the perception from it just being a good thing to do to measure satisfaction or work on customer success, customer experience in some way, taking it from a perception of it's just somehow a mystical best practice that people don't really understand, maybe like eating vegetables is a good thing to do. And you're going to bring that picture to life by being specific. What is it going to mean for an individual customer when they're experiencing this new thing, this new world that you're going to deliver? And when you're explaining it, you could focus on how the program will lead to fewer lost customers, or you could highlight some of the current pain points, possibly pain points that are really well known within your business, and explain how you're going to fix them and how life will be better once they're fixed. You can set expectations. We talked about the measurements and targets before. You can set expectations that you will be measuring satisfaction scores and they will be incredibly useful, but that you won't be setting targets for them. So have that conversation up front so that people understand they will be getting the numbers and they will be incredibly useful, but targets tends to make them less useful. You can Google Goodhart's law. That's a brilliant thing for why some measures are really, really useful until you make them targets. And actually, if you follow the tips above, you'll be choosing much better targets that are more closely connected with the performance of the business, like improving responsiveness, for example. The targets are going to be things that make a direct positive impact on the customer, being faster, being better, being high quality, things like those, things that directly impact the customer's experience. Now, some departments, some people in the organization can be a bit disconnected from this type of work and they may not think it's relevant to them. So I've mentioned at the bottom that, well, I've taken the example of sales. It can be other departments, it can be accounts or HR, people who don't necessarily feel it's relevant to them. But you and I know that everyone in an organization has an impact on customer experience one way or another. And sharing comments with them, sharing customers' comments in their own words directly with them on an ongoing basis, that's a really, really helpful and powerful way to get people engaged, because it helps them see what the impact they're having on customers is, even if they think they're more of a backroom role. Well, we've got more resources on some of these other topics. We've done webinars on some of the other things that I haven't been able to go into in detail today. We've got those available on the website, and we're always happy to talk to you one-to-one to do that too. We have got time for a couple of questions. So let's look at what's coming on the chat. I've got a couple of questions here. How do you manage senior stakeholder expectations of when ROI will be delivered? I think this is in the context of it can take some time to deliver the results of these projects and the return on investment. It can take possibly even years for customer experience initiatives to be delivered. How do you manage senior stakeholder expectations of when it will be delivered? That's a good question, isn't it? Because we'll be doing all this work and we'll be busy. But how do you keep these people who you've promised the vision to? How do you go? Well, I hope some of the points on that previous slide of communicating to stakeholders will be useful for that. What is it, I guess, that we can show along the way while we're waiting for the big results? I think the approach to our project, I use the phrase crawl, then walk, then run. So break the project down into steps so that you can deliver some milestones, some interim successes. That can be helpful. And if those are in the plan, then you can communicate regularly to stakeholders. That's another helpful thing, actually, keeping maybe a bulletin or just going around and proactively. Don't wait for people to say, okay, when are we going to get the results? make sure you're keeping them informed. You could do that with a newsletter or an email, or just when you're passing people in the car, however you communicate with people, keeping them informed before they're starting to ask the question themselves. That can be helpful. Having those milestones by setting interim deliverables, maybe having some success criteria for each of those. So you may not get the big outcome, but showing that you're making concrete steps towards it by having interim milestones with measures associated with those, and benefits that you can be showing how things are improving progressively, perhaps in small areas if you scope it down. Yeah, I think chunking it down, having interim metrics, keeping proactive communication, those are probably the best steps I can think of, shooting from the hip, for how you keep people engaged when the ultimate benefits are going to be longer term. Okay, well, we'll call it a day there. Thank you very much. There's information up if you've got further questions. We'd love to speak to you one-to-one if this has prompted other questions, or if you want to touch on some of those areas that I wasn't able to cover in detail today. Thank you very much for sparing time to listen in. Have a great afternoon.